Yo, thanks for tuning in to the What's Up podcast show. Today's topics will be about training during a pandemic, what to do when your A race is canceled, and should you even be training at all in a time like this. No one in history has been faced with this kind of craziness, so I figured who else to ask other than Jennifer Hoban. She's got a list of degrees that I can't even pronounce, but this BS in biology definitely sounds interesting. So how are you doing today? Thanks for stopping by.
I'm good, Chris. Good. That was quite the intro. I like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm good. From a relative standpoint,
Oh,
things are
yeah.
pretty crazy this week.
Yeah, I know the last time we talked, you were in California and your race had got canceled. Did you turn your California trip into like any fun training rides or anything?
Yeah, we kind of tried to turn lemons into lemonade, and we spent the whole weekend training instead of racing, obviously, and we had a great time. Really, it was kind of weird. Nobody was around.
Yeah.
Imagine Coronado being full of tourists one year, and this year was pretty much us in the hotel. Nobody else was around. So
So
we had
you're
the whole, yeah, we were on Coronado, and we had the whole place to ourselves. The entire hotel. Every time we
oh,
sat at the
wow.
bar, it was like being on a different planet. It's weird.
I've been there one time and I can say it was the most crowded place I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, not a soul
Yeah.
on the beach, not a soul around. We
Oh,
rode
yeah.
the Pacific Coastal Highway by ourselves.
Oh,
Pretty
nice.
crazy.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's both good and bad. I mean,
right.
it's good that you didn't have to like deal with all the traffic, but you know,
Mm, yep,
also bad
yep,
that you didn't get to race.
yeah, yeah, yep. So,
Well, I guess we'll get to some of these fun questions I have for you.
sure.
All right. This is almost an open-ended question and probably a hard one to answer.
Uh-huh.
How hard should we train during a pandemic?
Well, yeah, you're right. That's a really hard answer. And I think the pandemic that we are all experiencing right now is kind of changing hour by hour, minute by minute. And I think that's just not a simple answer. I think it has a lot to do with the goals that you have at hand. You know, did the race get canceled that you're training for? Is it postponed? You know, what is your goal in the first place? Where's your mind at? You know, what is your
Yeah,
paradigm that you reside in? And from there, figuring out what to do next. I definitely would say you want to do everything within moderation,
sure.
certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for me, I had my A race canceled and then I was like, oh man, what do I do now? Because I trained super hard for like 6, 7, 8 months. And then, comes time to go to Austin, Texas, and then my A race got canceled. So I didn't even know what to do. But kind of like what I did is I just took a step back, kind of reevaluated some things, set up some fake goals or whatever, and kind of trained for them. And
Uh-huh.
then kind of took like a down week just to kind of not like a down week, but more like a fun training week and try to set some Strava records,
Yeah.
break some PRs and do that kind of thing. And
I think
then
that was,
now, yeah,
yeah, I think that was probably a really healthy way to get to this place, this peak, this pinnacle of fitness, and instead of just totally relaxing and falling off the cliff, taking a step back and then kind of treating it as a recovery week, which you would have done anyway, right?
sure.
It, is a really healthy way to handle it.
Yeah, I kind of, did some Zwift races and tried that kind of stuff out and kind of, tried some new things. And then I went ahead and took my PTO that I was going to
Uh-huh.
take to go do my race and then just did some more fun things and then kind of like redid my training program and, uh, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
it's so tough because we still don't even know like when or if we're even going to race this season.
I know. I mean, here's the thing. I had a phone call a little bit ago with one of the people that I work with, a bike shop, and we were just kind of talking about this very subject of will there be any races? And I think at some point there will be. The country's going to have to open up for business across the board here pretty quick. We're looking at it like, oh, it's such a long time, but in the span of a human lifetime, what is 30 days? So I really think that, it's a separate argument whether it's too soon or not soon enough or whatever. Avoiding that discussion, I do think the government's going to relax this quarantine. And the moment they do, I think these race bodies, race directors will try to recover and set off as many races as they can. So I think we'll get to race in 2020. That's my gut feeling.
I hope so. I put one down in July that I'm training for, and I kind of switched it to a B race, and I'm hoping Leadville 100 will be my A race if I qualify in July. But I kind of started wondering, is July still too soon?
I don't know. I looked at the models yesterday, and for Colorado in particular, and they were saying that we hit our peak cases on March 31st. If everybody follows this stay-at-home order, we're going to see a lot of mortality this week, I guess, but we're going to see a decrease in cases. And so, I have high hopes that they're getting this thing under control. And I know Governor Polis said April 26th is kind of the guideline opening up the world again day, and that could move. Who knows? But for now, that's the line they've drawn in the sand.
Yeah. I mean, I think I heard the same thing too. I mean, how, like, as a whole, like, how are your athletes handling, this pandemic and getting the races canceled? Like, are they staying like mentally strong, or are they losing their minds, or what?
I wish I could say 100% of them stayed strong. That's not the case. I would say about 60% of my athletes have wrapped their heads around this. There's been, obviously some adjustment across the board, but really about 60% of them continue to train and work at this. And I think one of the things that I have approached my team with as a coach is learning to train, not necessarily to race. That
True.
Falling in love with the sport, training to be athletic and to be fit, and loving the sport itself has way more intrinsic value over time anyway than any race. And so I think, I feel pretty good about 60%.
Yeah, I think I kind of feel the same way as you just described. Like, I'm more into just training to be healthy and fit. I don't really need a race or like a be all end all goal to train.
Yeah.
I just definitely love training. I'm super into it.
Yeah. And I think most people that are at this level kind of share the same attitude.
Oh yeah.
But there are definitely that other 25, 30% that are complaining about the circumstances and hung their bike hook back up on the hook. And,
oh, wow.
They've just really lost motivation altogether, which that's hard to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is another fun one.
Okay.
I'm wondering about training and your immune system, and will training make us more likely to get COVID-19 or any other illnesses?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
And that's an evolving question, because I think as all these researchers that are involved in collecting data about COVID-19, that's evolving in and of itself. I think, 2 days ago, I read a paper about COVID-19 not only attacking the pulmonary system, it enters through our upper respiratory system, and then it attacks the lungs. Everybody, I think, understands that, and the pneumonia that it causes. But what I think people didn't know and are starting to learn is that once the lungs sort of succumb to this thing, it then enters the blood system, and they found that it not only has the capability to attack our epithelial tissue in our respiratory system, it actually is now capable of attacking your red blood cells. And that's really scary, because that's what's causing people to suffocate, if you will, or lose the ability to keep their oxygen levels high is that it's actually taking the place of oxygen on the red blood cell and then using the red blood cell to reproduce itself. And from there, it's almost not defensible. So to go back to your question, is it safe to train, or are we able to boost our immunity? I think the answer is yeah, we boost our immunity by training, because we strengthen all of the other systems in our body that help us defend this thing. But again, I think we have to be really careful about our choices. For example, I'm spending a lot of time on the trainer right now instead of riding outside. And maybe people have seen it, but the spray of the stuff that you let out of your nose and your mouth as you're breathing hard with that bike traveling at certain speeds, there's like a cone of like 15 feet in diameter behind you that you're spraying that potential pathogen into the air. And so like, it's really not safe to be out group riding. Really, really not safe.
Wow. I rode with someone the other day, and then like throughout the ride of like, we went out for 4 hours, and then I was constantly diagnosing. I started thinking, I'm like, whoa, she sounds sick, or whoa, this is a bad idea, or whoa. And then I just made sure I stayed off the front of her. And then like a couple of times, like she was beside me, and then if she kind of looked at me, like I'd speed up to like make sure, like hopefully, like, what you just described, I wouldn't get caught up in that. But then I got all creeped out, got a stopped up nose like Sunday night. But it's also allergy season too. So you can imagine like how many people are freaking out, like every time they sneeze or get a stopped up nose.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And how about all of that social media stuff flying around? I think I had this in January, quote unquote. Like there's a lot of people that are speculating. And I think that's the danger. We have to do all of the things that that are being recommended to us by these healthcare professionals to stay safe. And, bicycling is one of those things that we just maybe want to rethink how we're doing it. Another thought is, it's interesting because I was having a chat today with an orthopedic surgeon on Zwift, and he was like, yeah, we can't even fix people if they fall and break their leg. And I don't think people consider that, taking a fall on the bike and dislocating a shoulder or breaking a collarbone or any of those things that can potentially happen, that could be catastrophic right now. So I think you got to really reevaluate how you're training, and then how does it align with your goals? And you got to rethink your goals too. Are they realistic at this point?
Yeah, I think I've been pushing a little hard because I'm like really into like corners and like, getting videos and like footage of like flying through roundabouts. And then like I'll do a double take. And then we're talking the other day about running red lights, and occasionally, not all the time, like if there's no one else on the road, like I'll whiz through. And then the other day I was out, I started second guessing that because I started thinking, I'm like, the last place I want to be is the hospital with all those sick people.
I know, but you know what, Chris? They just passed that law here in Colorado that if you're approaching a stop sign or a light and there are no cars, you're not supposed to stop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're supposed to clear the light. They found that actually is increasing the safety of cyclists, and to make a stop is actually decreasing your safety. Isn't
That's
that interesting?
insane. Yeah, and
They've done some studies. So they just passed that law this week.
Yeah, and I also kind of felt like it's better for me to get out of this stretch of road instead of being, in with a bunch of traffic behind me, because I've always felt safer just to keep going in certain circumstances. Obviously, if it's a big intersection, stop. But if it's just like, you stop and there's a through street coming from the left side of the road and I'm on the right side, like a lot of times I just keep going, especially on Ridgegate. I don't know if you've ridden out like Ridgegate.
Oh yeah, Ridgegate can get scary.
Yeah.
That light there at Peoria and Ridgegate. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually go right there. Yep.
So I just read the article on it, and they said that they did enough research to determine that it helps fewer bicyclists have collisions with cars if they're allowed to run the light or the stop sign in a safe way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know Chambers has like a series of red lights where, I mean, you usually don't even have to stop if you're on a bike. And then that
Yeah.
road will kind of get backed up with traffic and people like whiz through and come by on the right and come by on the left. And
Mm-hmm.
because they're coming off of Ridgegate onto Chambers. And
Right.
so I usually, I mean, obviously I don't want to get hit by a car. If it looks like super clear, like I'll go ahead and like buzz through. And then that way I can also like smoke some PRs too. Because a lot of people
Yeah.
get caught at the light. I can pick up PR. I can pick up some Strava PRs like nobody's business running red.
Oh, those Strava segments,
Yeah.
the bane of our
Oh
existence.
yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's good fun though.
Yeah, it is good fun. I agree. The healthy dose of competition when we don't have any races.
Yeah. That's what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And then I'm also
Yeah.
secretly going through my little brother's Strava records and finding stuff that he did in like
Oh
2012.
God.
And I'm going to get him this weekend. He did Left Hand Canyon like 12 years ago up to Jamestown. So
Yeah.
I found his 2012 time and then my 2012 time. So I'm going to beat my 2012 time and get his too.
Good for you. I
Yeah.
want to hear all about it.
Oh yeah. It's going down. It's real.
Yeah. Well, back to your question though, I think, one thing that I've kind of watched a pattern with my folks is when they get ready for an A race and they race really hard, and if they fall off the wagon the next week, typically speaking, they end up with a cold. There's something that the human body does that allows that defense mechanism to come kind of convalesce, if you will, when the body's stretched like that. And so I think it's been my experience that my athletes stay more well if they can follow that A race with a recovery week that has some work in it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. And hopefully I don't, get sick, but I've also kind of experienced what you're talking about where you have like a long stretch of like hard training, you do your event, and then a week after your event, you get sick. Is that kind of like, is it just because there's like a buffer of like fatigue between like
Yeah.
rest and
Yeah. And like I said, I think the body's going to do everything it can to help you recover, including letting down its defenses. So I think you've got to do enough that you keep that immune system kind of ticking away like it's supposed to. But you got to be, it's like walking a fence. You got to stay on the top rail by doing just enough, but not too much that you're overtraining and you can actually recover.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Like I've always kind of wondered that. Then I also kind of wondered, you know, does training in and of itself make you sick, or is it more like what you do when you're not riding the bike?
Um, that's another super, super loaded
Yeah, I sprung
question.
one. Yeah.
um, well, it depends. Define training. Like we're talking about periodized training that is percentage wise increased appropriately. No, probably not going to hurt you. But if we're talking about like next week going out and training 20 hours when this week we only trained 5, then yeah, you're probably going to really hurt yourself. Either,
Yeah.
at risk for injury, but, injuring that internal system too. We're really complex machines. Everything works together. Our skeletal muscles, and our circulatory system and our hormones and our cardiovascular, everything is made to work together. And when we do something crazy like go out and work out for hard 20 hours like that, boy, we really, not only you can feel the muscles hurt, right? What you can't feel is that internal damage that you've done. And so you got to be really careful of that, because we're as complicated as we are, we're also extremely sensitive.
That's interesting. I never even thought about it like that, or I never even thought about the actual damage that I'm doing to myself, if any. So I can definitely from time to time, like yesterday I went out and did, I was like, I want to ride tempo watts for 2 hours. So then I went out and did that. I got like low tempo watts for 2 hours. And then my
Hmm.
heart rate was just barely in tempo. So then I was wondering, like, how hard is that? How bad is that, like, really bad for you? Or is it good for you? Or like, that's
Well,
another
I
thought.
get, yeah, I mean, I think that leads into the question that we had kind of briefly talked about previously, which is that 80-20 and,
Mhm.
um, taxing your heart enough that you get more fit. The thing about training is you want to create enough stimulus that it tears you down a little bit because you're going to build back stronger, right?
Sure.
But you don't want to tear down really hard. And that's the difference between suffering injury and then really actually recovering and getting better.
So then when you say 80-20, is that also kind of like, is that polarized training? Is
Yeah,
that considered?
polarized is another name for it, right?
Sure.
80-20 is a term that was actually looked at from an economical standpoint and then a sociological standpoint, but it's been applied to, I don't know, numerous systems, including training. And
Mhm.
we found that if you stay somewhere between 70 and 80% of your training time down in the lower training zones, um, it's still work, but it's not nearly the hard work um, that you're talking about with tempo ride.
Yeah.
That's where your aerobic fitness really builds.
You think it builds like, so when you say 80-20, is that like 80% of a single ride or 80% of your total, maybe like monthly volume of training?
Yeah, you could do it both ways.
Yeah.
Um, the way I coach my athletes is I plan about 80% of their weekly time to be
Hmm.
down in zone ones and zone two, and then about 20% of their time up above that in zone three, four, five, six, if it's applicable.
Yeah. So then you would use the 80-20 model more during the base stages or just year round?
No, we use it pretty much year round
Hmm.
um, until that peak time when we're getting ready to race.
Yeah,
But as the volume comes down, then I bring the intensity up.
sure.
Yeah, and zone three and zone four are very different. Zone three is this aerobic threshold,
Yeah.
and they've done a ton of research to show that if you spend too much time in zone three, there's diminishing return. If you spend about 8% of your training time up above threshold, then you do enough work to increase the strength of your heart and your circulatory system.
Hmm.
But it's not so much that it over challenges your heart. Then you got to do about
Yeah,
12% down in zone three just to kind of get the muscles ready for that sort of pain. We all have been there in the pain cave, right?
sure. Sure, sure.
And then of course deciding what distance you're going to race at is going to be appropriate too with where you train. So I would say 75% of my athletes are training all the time for a half Ironman or marathon or
Hmm.
ultras. We want to spend a lot of time in zone two,
Okay.
a lot of time in zone two, because that's where we race.
Yeah. Yeah. For a triathlete, like, I definitely don't know that much about it, but my oldest brother is a triathlete. And then I look at his bicycle rides. I'm like, dude, you're riding too easy. I'm like, why are you not riding at sweet spot? It's zone 3.5 all the
Yeah.
time, bud. Like, and then he's like, well, I'm in a different sport. It's like, so we're going to do a lot of zone two. And he's probably more polarized, the 80
Hmm.
20 rule. And I'm trying to me, it's like, I feel like I didn't realize that tempo was considered hard. I thought it was like right at that cutoff of like, yeah, you're doing enough work, but you can also recover from it. And
Yeah.
I got bro science on my side. Like that's all I got. I don't know the science behind it all. I just know I'm like, oh, okay, I'm getting faster. Let's just do more of this. Okay. It's been 3 weeks. And then I go do that for 3 weeks and then I have a down week. And then I kind of
Hmm.
follow that model, which I have no idea if that's polarized or what the heck that
Well,
is.
you can use it that way in a build
Yeah,
period for sure,
sure.
and we do. But we spend, if we're going to look at a periodized chart for somebody who's got an
Yeah.
A race in July and we're starting in December, we're going to spend about 60% of that training time down in aerobic base.
Uh-huh.
And then we'll make a shift at some point to more tempo training, but we're still going to spend a good percentage of the time down in zone 2 for that recovery piece,
Sure.
active recovery. And then as we approach the race, depending on the length of the race, then you decide how long that taper is. And of course, every athlete's different too. Some people need a 3-day taper. Some people need a 10-day taper. It
Sure.
just, it really has to depend on the athlete themselves. But I would say, doing zone 3 all the time year round, yeah, that's probably not going to be really very good for you. And it probably would explain why people get to a plateau and never improve.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, obviously I'm kind of going with what Trainer Road does pretty much. And
Uh-huh.
then I'm on a budget, so I'm using Trainer Road. And then I'm using, I went through I think it was like an 18-week sweet spot base where, 3 days a week was probably sweet spot. And then I do like one, like you said, zone 2 kind of active recovery day. And then
Uh-huh.
I do whatever I wanted to do on the weekends and wouldn't really follow what they were saying really. So I'd go
Yeah.
do like 4-hour group rides at, tempo. Like I would come back at 160. My heart rate would be like 165, 166 for like 4 hours. And then I'd wake up, do it again the next day, take Monday off, and then, go back to my normal Trainer Road program of, 3 back-to-back days of tempo intervals,
Uh-huh.
and then take Friday easy, and then you know and then they would have me at like a 600 TSS.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was consistently just putting out these 800 TSS weeks, and then but I kind of started seeing, well, as long as I get my rest weekend, it's all right. And then I did get really, really good quick,
Uh-huh.
but also have like a huge zone 2 aerobic base from, the 90s, like all the way into the 2000s. So I've
Sure.
seen a lot of benefits from sweet spot, but I've been kind of wondering at what point it was going to taper. And I think that I feel a little bit of plateau.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm going to do my endurance rides, like I'm going to go do 185 watts for, 3 hours, but that's absolutely my window. Like I cannot pedal for 3 hours any harder than that. So I think that I hit a plateau, kind of like you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that if you switch your gears a little bit and spend some time back down in aerobic base, but then you have really 2 good key workouts that are short at
Mhm.
threshold, then you'll see some benefit. So I'd switch back to base building, but then keep some threshold work at
Sure.
some point in the week. And when I program design, I try to give people a day off or a recovery day, and then we do some hard work, but it's
Yeah.
short. And then
Yeah.
the long rides, easy. I would say somewhere between 62 and 72% of your FTP.
And another thing that interests me is training stress score. I know that's a
Uh-huh.
Training Peaks thing,
Yep.
but do you use that with your athletes? And I mean, or is that something that you just don't use with the 80/20?
No, I absolutely do.
Cool.
It's part of that periodization. Training Peaks is a great tool that was developed by 3 kind of masterminds in
Mhm.
cycling. Andy Coggins, who is really the one that developed the FTP measurement and really kind of masterminded how we can train with watts. And then Joe
Mhm.
Friel, who was a coach in Boulder. He's retired at this point, but let's see, Hunter Allen. He's
Yeah, he's
right
good.
now like the governing. I don't remember if he's the CEO or the president or what, but he's major role at USA Cycling
Yeah.
and an author of some really great training tools when it comes to looking at watts. But at any rate, the 3 of them developed that TSS score, and it's a training stimulus that's heart rate, your pace work, and how many watts, or, you know, if you're swimming or you're running, where you are in terms of your
Yeah.
pace. And then that compilation is a score over the time period of a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I do use TSS. But, you know, when you're training for an Ironman, going out for a 2-hour, 2.5, sometimes 3-hour run is not an unusual thing.
Yeah.
And that'll bring some pretty high TSS scores, even in zone 1.
Yeah. My brother, he was saying that he would put in some like 1,000 TSS weeks, my older brother. But like at a certain point, like he just got to where he couldn't really do it and he felt like that was too much.
Yeah.
And then here's an interesting topic. Him and I, me and my older brother argue about. I'm like, dude, you're going too easy. Like, what are you doing, man? You need to step it up. He's like, bro, I'm unloading right now. I'm like, because I'm old school. I don't know. I've never heard of unloading until recently. So what is that?
Well, that unloading, hang on just a second. It's kind of like just a changing direction. It actually freshens you up. We get so stale sometimes when we're training all the time. Like brains get stale, bodies get stale, and we got to unload so that you can kind of it's kind of like rethinking things. What are we doing this for? Recovery, in mindset, psychology, it's just a really important part. I make my athletes take a month off every year.
Wow.
Yeah. I tell them, get off the bicycle, no more running, hang up your running shoes, go snowshoeing, go hiking, go climb a 14er, take a month off. Yoga, I don't care what it is, go do something else.
See, I kind of mentioned to bring my brother up again. I kind of mentioned to him, I'm like, how come you don't just take 2 weeks off and then get, something like that? And he just says it doesn't work for him. Like the time off just kind of jacks with him.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. What I'll do for myself is I'll just turn off all my devices, not track anything. I'll go out for a ride and just ride by feel and not pay attention to my heart rate, not pay attention to my devices, kind of get back to the roots of why I found this sport in the first place. Yeah, really, it is just about finding freshness again.
I kind of did a lot of that too, but I was training for motocross. So I did a lot of like traditional zone 2, like LSD, long, slow distance. And then I did like my hard workouts in the gym for motocross. So, but I wasn't paying any attention to watts. It was more like go out, kind of de-stress kind of thing on the bicycle, which actually helped me a whole lot. And then now that I'm back more into competitive cycling, I'm super stoked on numbers, super stoked on threshold power, super stoked on breaking like every record that I've set in the last 10 years, as well as like stoked on trying to do some racing and all that. And then, I was kind of like, well, let's just try this trainer road thing out and some of these self-help applications that are out there. I mean, do you think these are good, bad? I mean,
I think if that's what you've got access to, it's a great tool.
Yeah.
Some people, coaches retain coaches because it takes that subjective feel out of the training, and a coach can look completely at you objectively, where that's hard for people to do with themselves. But not everybody can afford that. And the great thing about all these tools is they have theory and they use theory, and they do a really pretty good job at designing a periodized program that's going to help you be better had you be better than if you'd not used it. Let's say it that way.
Yeah.
The problem with those, though, not everybody improves at the same rate. We're all different. And there's these programs really don't give you that insight. And so that can be kind of a dangerous pitfall. I don't know about you, but most of my athletes, there's 2 personalities. There's the one that needs to turn their calendar green every week in Training Peaks. and will kill themselves doing it. And
Yeah.
then there's athletes that like they're just going to do whatever you say. It doesn't matter. And they don't care if they're sick or they're hurt. They're just going to do whatever you say. And I think that's a problem for somebody, a pitfall, if they're that personality using something like Trainer Road.
Yeah, I'm definitely more the kind of person that wants to hit every workout, but I also have experience enough to know, like, oh, I'm not hitting my numbers. My heart rate's weird. So if my legs feel slow and I'm not able to push the power and my heart rate's low, I'm like, whoa, buddy. So
Yeah.
I'll like, you know, turn it into like a 1 hour, like zone 1 and 2 ride, and then get the duration, but allow myself to rest a little bit. And I know I definitely got cooked, but the only reason I knew that I was cooked is because I'd been at that point before. Like I was almost sick and my power was down. Like I didn't even feel like I could warm the trainer up or like calibrate the
Ooh,
trainer on Ruby. That's how slow
yeah.
my legs were. So then I wound up, luckily that happened on a rest week, but I took that rest week to the next level. And then my next build phase was amazing.
Uh-huh. Well, that takes discipline. I think you
Yeah.
can learn that. Some people feel things and are more in tune with themselves than others. But that's part of what, I try to teach. Listen to those signals. Pay attention to the cardiac drift. Pay attention to the fact that if you've been given a rest interval and your heart rate's staying up where it was, that's not a good sign. Take
No.
more time. Listen to
Yeah.
yourself. If I prescribed 8 intervals for you and you can't hold all 8, but you could do 5, then do that. Because I am a big believer that you don't do the junk miles.
Yeah. And, it's kind of good that you said that, like using discipline. And, a lot of people that are beginners to training, they get, on Zwift and they're doing all these Zwift races and then they're doing their training with like no prior experience to what being
Mm-hmm.
overtrained or, why
Right.
they're getting sick or why they're not getting better. So I never really
Uh-huh.
even looked at it from that point of view. That is kind of good to call out, about,
Mm-hmm.
beginners getting into these applications and they're like, oh yeah, I'm super fit, I'm going to choose expert level, and then they're doing 12 hours of tempo and sweet spot a week, and
Right.
then 3 to 4 weeks in they're cooked and then they just quit riding forever. There
Yeah.
is a chance that could happen for sure.
It happens a lot in the fitness world.
Oh yeah.
Not so much maybe at our level because people take time to get to this level and this interest, and they've learned a thing or two. But definitely, it's definitely the beginner folks. Like that is a real pitfall. It's why in January gym memberships go through the roof because
Yeah.
everybody thinks they're going to go and get in shape, and then they go and they kill themselves for 2 weeks, and then
And then
what?
it's done.
Yeah, they're just cooked because they didn't
Yeah.
go about it the right way with the right kind of mindset and the right periodization and the right guidance.
I got one more good one for you.
Okay.
And this is a real good one. You can defer this one to like, nah, I don't want to talk about that, or we can talk about it. And I
Okay.
brought this up, like, I've read about masters athletes experiencing left ventricle hypertrophy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and things that, older athletes, especially like myself, might need to look out for. And, we say going hard, like I didn't realize tempo was that hard but I mean, do you think tempo, sweet spot levels would like lean heavy to something like left ventricle hypertrophy?
Yeah. Unfortunately,
Oh,
too much of
bummer.
that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So heart's a muscle just like your skeletal muscle, and you should train it in a periodized way so that it can improve and not get hurt. Right.
Yeah.
We've got something in our cardiac tissue in the muscle itself, and they're kind of like cords.
Hmm.
And imagine that wood airplane that you got when you were a kid, where you'd spin the propeller and
Yeah.
twisting that rubber band
Oh, yeah.
to the point where it would just like gum up, right? And then you'd
Uh-huh.
let go of it and it would fly. But that paper or that little wood airplane wouldn't last very long, because if you did it 20 times in a row where you spun that rubber band super tight and then let it go, it would lose the ability to hold its elasticity, right?
Yeah.
And so at some point, either that or it would break. The rubber band would just break, and
Sure.
then you couldn't fly the airplane anymore. Well, it's kind of how those cords in our cardiac tissue, it's called cordae longae,
Mm-hmm.
which is a Latin term. That's kind of how it works. If you are constantly pressing that left ventricular chamber of your heart so hard that it's just expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting to push the blood to the body that's oxygenated, what happens is if you do that too many times too far, you're stretching those cords and they lose their elasticity. And that's what an enlarged heart is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Ventricular hypertrophy is just the clinical term for an enlarged heart.
Sure.
Then you lose stroke volume, and it can create a cardiac event for sure.
So do you think because I love sweet spot and I love tempo. I love it. Like I'll just like going out, like pushing on the pedals and seeing the power come up like below threshold. I love seeing that. Do you think it's a better idea to say do 3 sets of like 20 minutes instead of me going, I want to ride tempo for 3 hours and going crushing? Is it better to keep it like interval based or occasionally?
Yeah, I think you would find that you would improve more. I think
Yeah.
you talked about already hitting a plateau, and that's one of the that's why I say it's a place of diminishing return, because you are only going to be able to stretch your heart so far.
Sure.
And you're only going to be able to push so much blood, right? But you can still keep that level of fitness by doing less.
Sure.
So while it might feel really good and fun, you're kind of setting yourself up for something catastrophic down the road. I think a good approach to training on a tempo day is, okay, you could still go out for 4 hours, but you're going to only spend an hour of it at tempo, and the other 3 hours you're going to concentrate on some other things like cadence or keeping that heart rate down. And another good indicator, I kind of referred to it a little bit earlier, is watching those recovery intervals. If your heart is not recovering where it should, then that's a signal that you've gone too far and you should cool it. Yeah.
And then when I look at it, like yesterday, it's like my zone 2 heart rate is like 141 to 151. And then if I go out and do like low tempo, like my average heart rate would be like 153. So in my mind, because I'm like, well, that's zone 2-ish, I'm just at the top of zone 2, but my power is, tempo, like low tempo. And I'm like, is that, so then it just leads me to think, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm kind of doing zone 2, but.
Well, that's probably an indicator you need a new FTP test.
Okay.
Yeah. You could just, but you want to factor your heart rate in that FTP test.
Sure.
And you look at, okay, where was I for this? I don't know which test you use, but most people use that 20-minute
test.
20-minute or a ramp test, right? And you watch heart rate. Where was my heart rate in that section? And you can even highlight that section in Training Peaks, and it'll tell you your average heart rate. And then you can set that up.
And forth between the 20-minute and then the ramp. And since I've been doing so much time on the trainer, I kind of like stepped away from the 20-minute test because it's just really hard.
I think the ramp is a much easier psychologically on the trainer than the 20-minute test.
And it's pretty close. I mean, I did a 20-minute test, and then 3 or 4 weeks later did the ramp test for the first time, and then I tested 4 watts stronger, like on the ramp.
Nice.
So it's pretty close. And then like you're saying, I'm starting to feel like I might need to take like another ramp test, which next week's my rest week. And then after my rest week, I'll do a ramp test again.
Yeah.
maybe get like a couple of more watts out. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
but kind of note where your heart rate is,
yeah,
because you may have changed your zones. You know, it's kind of counterintuitive. You want your zones to get really big. You want zone 2 to be massive.
yeah,
You know, work would be, burning fat would be, and that's how we define zone 2 from a physiological standpoint. You know, 75 or greater of our fuel sources are being burned from fat, not from blood sugar. Okay, so you want to look at, can I burn fat at 100 beats per minute, and can I burn fat at 150 beats per minute? And that would be a massive zone 2, right? And then
yeah,
zone 3 is a little smaller, and zone 4, those guys would shrink a little bit. But being able to do more work with less cardiac stress is actually a positive adaptation. So if
yeah.
you can get your threshold to go from 180 down to 170, but still be putting out the same watts, that's a positive adaptation,
Oh, I did
which,
not think about that.
which is kind of a light bulb moment for a lot of athletes, because they're like, oh man, I got my heart rate up to 200 today. Okay, well, where were your watts when you were doing that?
True.
You know, were you in zone 3? And that's an indicator right there that you're overtraining that day.
Yeah, maybe I'm starting to see some of that because I'm actually seeing less higher heart rates, and then I'm starting to see similar powers to like what I would see at threshold. But
Uh-huh.
and my threshold heart rate was like 177, but I'm starting to see a lot of what I would see at 177 at 165.
Okay, so that's that right there is an indicator that you should FTP test and pay attention to your heart rate, and
Okay.
your heart rate zones have probably changed.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. And then
Yeah.
I'll probably try to see what I can figure out in training peaks
Yeah,
for
right.
setting my
Well, and
zones up.
you literally just highlight the 20-minute section or the ramp section. You can put the mouse over that section in your data and
Uh,
highlight the 20 minutes, and you'll see a box pop up with data, and it'll give you your average heart rate right there. And that would probably be at the end there, maybe the last 5 minutes. As you're really ramping up, you can also highlight just the last 5 minutes. That's probably your threshold.
Nice. See, the last time I like really looked at what I thought my threshold was, I was in Alabama. I did this long climb on a mountain bike, and also that's at sea level. It was like 177. So I kind of think it's probably like 173-ish
Okay.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, test and
yeah,
find out.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've kept you on probably a little bit longer than uh
That's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
anticipated, but I really appreciate your time. And if anyone out there has any questions, just comment on the YouTube video, and then we'll get them answered. And then, do you have any like social media platforms you want to?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at Finding Fast Again, and you can actually find me on Facebook with um, the same handle, Finding Fast Again.
That's awesome. I really appreciate your time, and I enjoyed it. And
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. My pleasure.